support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, the grim realities of a spiraling Ebola epidemic and hopeful news in the fight against one of the most lethal forms of cancer. We're talking about it in our monthly house call with Dr. Joe. Later, the 5th annual Duval Comic Zine Fest sets up shop in the CoRK Arts District, including demos, displays, and DIY inspiration. But first, I am joined, as I am each month, by our own Dr. Joe Sirven, host of the Saturday WJCT program, What's Health Got to Do with It? Dr. Joe, thanks for being here.
It is always one of my favorite times of the month.
Same me. It's great to have you. It's always fun to sit down with you. Dr. Joe is also here to take your calls and questions on any healthcare topic. You can reach us on air at 904-549-2937. You can email First Coast Connect at WJCT.org, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find the other ways to connect with us. You know, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. I mean, usually you come in, Dr. Joe, with some treats for the newsroom. Not everybody would know that a doctor is this devious, but usually it's something sweet. Today you brought us some bagels. Anyway, it's always great to have you come in for that reason as well, because the newsroom gets very jolly.
Food is love. Right?
Food is love.
I'll just leave it that way.
And you do. You spread it. You spread it around. So, all right. I do want to start talking about some difficult news in the world of global health. We are seeing this spiraling Ebola epidemic in Central Africa. This is something that follows on the heels of this hantavirus cruise ship outbreak, and questions being raised just about our global response and our ability as a nation and as a global community to respond to these. A lot of people concerned about cuts that we've seen to global healthcare, particularly from the United States.
Yeah, so I would say we should probably divide out those two outbreaks because I think this is a tale of both good news and not so good news. I'll start on the positive side. On the hantavirus one, that one, the U.S. Response was kind of very typical, to be honest with you, probably because there were Americans aboard that ship. Many of those Americans, they sent a group out there to the boat. They took a big chunk of those individuals that were on the boat that were American to the University of Nebraska, where they have a special quarantine center. So it was very typical. And nothing's ever perfect, but so I'll give that one was more what we'd expect. But I think because there was more involvement and just where it was, a cruise ship, Americans on board, things of that sort. The Ebola one is quite different from the previous times. It's a confluence of just bad circumstances. Yes, the U.S. Cuts to federal health aid to countries in that area where the Ebola is. It's a fraction. It used to be in the $1 billion mark. It's a fraction of that now, and that helped to support vaccines and getting teams out there. You put that on top of a very difficult infrastructure, if you will. It's challenging. It's sometimes very war-torn in general. And then you add the extra element of just the geography of where it's located. All that put together creates this really bad situation. And a lot of what we used to be able to do or did has not occurred.
It's interesting that we are seeing this debate over what to do with Americans who have been exposed to Ebola and whether they should be sent to Kenya's this initial option. The Kenyan government apparently had sort of initially approved that idea. The Kenyan people not so thrilled about it. A court, stepping in to stop that. And then even if there are people who've been infected, the United States was looking at sending them somewhere perhaps in Europe for tertiary treatment, as opposed to in previous Ebola outbreaks, bringing them to the United States where we have these quarantine facilities and we have the care that some would say is needed. People who've been exposed in the past to Ebola, who've recovered and from a disease that, as many as half of those infected die from.
So what happens when you start kind of putting up a quarantine center in another country, then to the Americans who normally go out to respond, the sense is like, will I be able to even get back into the US
Right.
if I go out there? And that has kind of a chilling quell of wanting to do that if there's this real concern, I can't even get back
For
home.
physicians or first line responders.
And so in that regard, I don't think that is a good approach in any way. As I said, the Ebola, we went through this before in the last and there's been a few outbreaks, and that's actually one of the reasons that they even had that University of Nebraska quarantine center, state of the art. They have everything that's needed, and that's one of others that we have here. I'm not so sure why we would want to kind of do something like that for a virus that is not known to spread except for direct contact.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Dr. Joe Sirven about medical headlines and taking your calls and questions at 904-549-2937. We have a call from Francis in Riverside. Good morning, Francis. Go ahead.
Good morning. I was wondering if the doctor was familiar with something called functional neurological disorder or functional disorder, and if he had known of anybody in Jacksonville that treats that kind of disorder.
Thanks, Francis.
Yeah, so Francis, thanks for that question. So functional neurologic disorder just means that there is someone who has symptoms that are neurological. It could be from funny spells to tremor, anything of any sort. But instead of finding a neurological reason for it, like a brain abnormality or problem, rather it seems to be that it's more triggered by a stressor or a psychological element. There are folks that treat it. What makes it difficult is like who owns that. It's presents to neurologists, but the underlying issue tends to be psychological or stress, almost like a PTSD, and this is how it manifests. So the question is that it's a psychologist that's the most likely best help for that, but they often show up in a neurological offices, and this is what makes our fragmented system of symptoms, specialties more complicated.
How do you determine if somebody has something that is a neurological cause versus perhaps a psychological or psychiatric cause?
So you have to kind of do the full evaluation. It may be starting with the history, the examination, and then whatever testing is needed. If all of that, it's almost like by default, if everything kind of rules out, and then you have the ability to kind of figure out from the history some trigger or something of that sort, that's how you kind of nail down the diagnosis.
You start with the neurological assessment, though.
You want to always start with taking the symptom at face value, evaluate it fully, make sure it's not an emergency situation or something that you need to do something about right then and there. And then, one by one, you nail it out. It's literally a diagnosis by exclusion almost.
It's important to say, too, there's more and more research into illnesses or symptoms that manifest that may have a psychological component, to not dismiss them as something in your
Exactly.
head, that those are still very real disorders that require, a medical intervention.
You just hit it on the nail there, Ann. A lot of people, they get upset because it's like the feeling is you're being gaslit, you're just being moved around. But, it's important to remember that a lot of times things that are underlying stressors, anxiety and depression, they can manifest with physical symptoms. And that is just the nature of our brains and being human. And that is something, but you do have to take it seriously and you do have to do the evaluation. It's a great question, Francis.
I want to talk now about a headline that has been sort of burgeoning over the last few months. It has to do with the Secretary of Health's perspective on certain conditions. And obviously he's got, a new way of looking at a lot of things. Some of it is based in medical science. Some of it is based less so. And so there's been criticism around that. But one thing that he has been seen lately around issues, whether it's, depression, whether it's obesity, whether I mean, all kinds of things that he's perhaps bringing back, some say, this shame-based approach to medicine. The idea that because you suffer this condition, it's somehow your fault.
Yeah, so this is one of those areas where he does strongly urge personal responsibility, which then puts the onus of a condition or circumstance on the individual, right? And the problem with that is that enforces stigma. The stigma, a lot of times what happens in that circumstance is that you end up hiding it. If something is stigmatizing, whether it's an infectious disease or being overweight or whatever it may be, the natural response is, I'm not going to show it to anybody because I don't want to be ostracized or cast apart. I'll give them this. We all have to keep personal responsibility. If that's why we talk about don't smoke. Maybe I shouldn't have brought in those bagels this morning or something along those lines.
Don't say that.
But you have to take those personal responsibilities. But what gets missed in his point is that sometimes the systems if you're overweight and there isn't a place to kind of get produce and there's 7 fast food restaurants on the way to your home, the system is set up in a way that, how are you going to kind of stop yourself from not driving into one of those places versus what you should be doing? So it should be not only personal responsibility, but system responsibility has to be kind of hand in hand in that. And I think that's what gets missed when you start shaming folks into your decisions, if you will.
Yeah. One thing that he has proposed recently is the idea that he wants to not necessarily disincentivize, but help people who are on antidepressants get off antidepressants. He's particularly concerned about over-medicalizing children, and there's, a generation that's being raised on some sort of pharmaceuticals. He's obviously not a big supporter of the pharmaceutical industry in a variety of ways. And I think there's part of that messaging that is very seductive for people in the world of the kind of the Maha believers, but also very mainstream, which is, how much of our health is an intervention, is something we're buying, is something that we're being told by this industry we have to take in order to be normal or healthy.
As usual with an issue like this, there is a part that I can completely agree with, and then there's a part you just have to kind of like hold back for a moment. The part I completely agree with, you're right. If you don't need to be on a medication, then you shouldn't have to be on it. And sometimes it is very easy for clinicians to just simply write a prescription, and then the question is, when do I come off of it? And that is where things go a little haywire in the healthcare system. So I don't mind kind of re-looking at, if you're on a med for a while, to ask the question, do I need to still be on that med? What I don't want people to do is just stop it cold turkey, because there are consequences to that, including an antidepressant. I might add, Great Britain, the United Kingdom, actually underwent this exact same issue in their National Health Service, with just kind of getting people to say, do I need to be on this or not? Not to stop it on your own, but to ask that. And that's a fair question for a doctor.
It isn't necessarily something that gets a lot of reevaluation. No. When you start taking something, it's not like every time you go to the doctor, they say, well, how is this working for you? Do you want to stay on it?
Right.
People can end up taking a handful of meds pretty easily without any pushback over time.
Americans overall, when you look at how many pills that they're taking on a daily basis, the average now is anywhere between a low of 4 to 13, depending on age. So it is not a bad idea to always look to see my medication list and my need for it. Not to stop it on your own, but ask, because that needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, one of the changes he's proposing would provide for some additional support for stepping down medication, including an increase in therapy, which I think everybody can agree has some value. I want to take a call now from Dennis in Mayport Village. Good morning, Dennis. Go ahead.
Hi, it's Denise. No problem. Could your guest comment on Kennedy's use of steroids and peptides? He seems to want people to grow up without drugs, living naturally, but yet he won't age naturally. He's dependent on steroids and peptides. Could you comment on comparing those two outlooks?
Thank you. And maybe spray tans as well. But Denise, sorry for messing up your name there. Dr. Joe, your thoughts about, some but not the other when it comes to helpful interventions.
Denise, you are a very wise person in bringing that point up. Those are wellness trends, and he certainly has embraced peptides and other type of compounds like that. What I would simply say is that's just an experiment. I mean, we don't know even. I mean, there are some peptides that have evidence to support their use for certain conditions, but there are others we have no idea. And that's just like if one is just going out and putting that in, that's just you experimenting with your own body. That is not what I would say good medical advice, and that's just leaving it where it is for folks.
All right. Well, kind of in that same vein, or at least nervous system, there is this new we say the vagus nerve is having a moment, right? In the world of social media, this is a trend and a conversation that is all over TikTok. It's, wellness world. Tell us, what is vagus nerve stimulation? Why is it all of a sudden getting so much attention?
So the vagus nerve, just as a reminder for folks, is the main conduit in your body for the parasympathetic nervous system, which means that is the part of the nervous system that's to rest and digest. So people have leaned on, well, maybe if we stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, it'll make you calmer, be able to think and all that, kind of get to a place where things are less anxious. The science behind vagus nerve stimulation is real. There is that is something that you can hang on to. The devices and all this other stuff that people are doing left and right that they're selling you, we have no idea how useful that is. Does it do anything? I know people like the idea of cold water plunge. Please be careful if you have a heart condition. Not a good idea because that might help reset you for a moment. But if you have a heart condition, may not be the best thing that you want to do. So I would say, do your homework. People will sell you anything on the internet from anywhere with these names, and it's more marketing hype as opposed to the real science that's followed there.
Well, remind us, if I go on my internet and I want to do my research and I type in vagus nerve stimulation, I'm first of all going to be hit by a million influencer videos. And so as a consumer or someone who's interested in researching this for my own health, remind us again, where are the reliable sources?
So you want to do a couple things. If you feel funny with the government these days, I used to always say start with NIH, CDC. If you feel funny with that, then the other place to kind of go is specialty organizations, American Academy of Neurology, American Psychiatric Association, whatever the issue is, they will have stuff on that. Secondly, go to big health systems or even insurance companies. Believe me, they're watching this from a financial standpoint and also for care, and they have fantastic public-facing sources. Yes, I'm biased. I work at Mayo, so I'm gonna always say Mayo Clinic, but Cleveland Clinic, Mass General, Hopkins, Stanford, UCLA, these all have great public-facing websites that give you tons of information.
That's really good advice. We are talking to Dr. Joe Sirven. He's here for his monthly house call. We're taking your calls and questions too. You can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can call us on air at 904-549-2937. Alcohol and pregnancy. So this is, it's a little bananas. I saw one article that said drinking during pregnancy sounds like a generational punchline. And yet this has been increasing over the last decade.
The fact that we're having this discussion is stunning to me after how much that has been invested in this area. Yes, 1 out of 8 pregnant women, say that they have drank during pregnancy. Now, let's be fair to them. Oftentimes, by the time you find out you're pregnant, it is 8-9 weeks into pregnancy. So I get that may have a number there, but when you go down deeper in those numbers, It's been increasing over the past decade, so we can't just blame COVID. And number two, about a quarter of those women, they're binge drinking. At least they honestly say binge drinking, more than 4 or 5 drinks a day in some situations. A reminder, alcohol is a teratogen. That is a compound that, if taken while pregnant, has a direct impact on the growth and development of a baby. The placenta does not filter it out. It crosses the placenta. The baby does not have, fully formed liver or anything to metabolize it. So it just goes there. The question that always arises, and this is why there's such a blanket statement, is how much do you need to create a problem?
And remind us what some of the problems are. I mean, there are a whole spectrum of fetal alcohol disorders, and they can really run the gamut. So remind us what some of them are.
So it can run from everything from it interferes with the growth of your body. So there's facial features, not full height. You don't get to your full potential of what you're supposed to be. So because it messes up the signaling, if you will, of the cells as they're dividing. It can cause issues with intellectual development. It can cause problems with behavior. In fact, when you look at statistics, a large chunk of fetal alcohol syndrome seems to occur in situations where they've surveyed, the prison system, foster care. And not to say that those things cause it, it's just it just tells you this is what ends up occurring in certain situations, just where there's a lot of alcohol involved. There's not a way. The simplest thing is to try to be as abstinent. And I think what's happening is that there's a sense of maybe a drink won't hurt. Maybe 2 drinks won't hurt. The reality is any drink that you take is going to cause something. Whether it gets to this level, we don't know. So it's just, given that it's a teratogen and the baby can't metabolize it, then it's best to not do it to the degree that you can, understanding that people don't know they're pregnant till weeks into it.
Sure.
And most of these symptoms occur by 19th day of gestation.
The symptoms of an impact from alcohol?
Like if it's going to happen, that's when the face is developing. This is when these things are happening. But that's what makes it so complicated.
It's interesting, too, because, it was fairly recently that we've even started recommending that women either cut back or not drink.
Correct.
1977 was the first public health advisory, and that advisory was just 2 drinks a day. That was the advice, 2 drinks a day. Now, of course, the CDC says anybody that's able to get pregnant, they've said this for the last 10 years, if you're even able to get pregnant, you should not be drinking, which is that's a tall order. Like you said, a lot of people don't know they're pregnant. They stop very often when they learn they're pregnant, and sometimes change their behavior for a lifetime, but they don't know. We still,
and here's the what's difficult, we still don't know that amount. The studies, the registries, in fact, some of that has actually been cut in terms of kind of HHS work in that direction. So we're kind of blind still in terms of trying to get to the nuance to the point you're making, which is how much is safe.
We know 2 drinks a day, probably not the recommendation, right?
That because right now, because we know it's a teratogen, we know it will do that. It's just, what is that amount that flips it over, becoming symptomatic versus not?
In terms of this administration's tracking of it, you note that there's been some pullback of funding, some key databases that doctors and scientists use to track trends in drinking, impacts of drinking. But there is some research that shows that opioids and cannabis, those drugs may not be nearly as damaging as alcohol. Alcohol still being our favorite drug, as it were.
Alcohol, as I said, that's why I point out it's a teratogen. That's a very definitive science word saying it is known to disrupt the signals for development, period.
I've got an email from Karen. She says a woman in California who had calcifications in one of her breasts was able to get an AI-assisted breast review for $40, which identified ductal carcinoma that was not found by the radiologist. I'm in a similar situation. I've not been able to find a facility in Northeast Florida that offers AI reviews of my mammograms. Any comments?
Yeah, so radiology is probably one of the frontline areas for AI implementation because it tries to pick up, there's so many scans, and it may pick up things that we just cannot see with the human eye, because it's really AI versus the human eye in the world of radiology to try to understand that. I will say that if you look at some of the centers that are doing mammography, particularly in trying to, since it's all done to prevent breast cancer, some of them are going on to adopt some of those models. So I would say there are some health systems in the Northeast Florida sector and even Central Florida that are very much doing this. So I'd say there are opportunities here to get that.
So I want to talk about a little bit of good news,
Yes.
Dr. Joe, because very often our conversations are about anything but good news. And this really is cause for celebration. So recently there was a meeting of the American Society of Clinical Oncology. This was May 31st. And an announcement was made that received a standing ovation. Let's check it out. This was something that Dr. Mark Lewis posted on Twitter, and then we can talk about it.
The primary endpoint of the RASolute 302 study evaluating overall survival in the RAS G12 population demonstrated a statistically significant improvement in overall survival.
So you can see there the standing ovation. First of all, Dr. Joe, you've been to a lot of these conferences. You could hear when he starts talking, pretty dry sounding. What is your reaction when you see something like this?
That is extraordinary. I've had the pleasure of presenting, not in that meeting, but in something like that. I can assure you, I did not get a standing ovation with everyone stopping everything from what you're saying. That is incredible. And I think what that told me is two things. Number one, how badly people want something for pancreatic cancer that can work. But that reaction, that's something that is incredible, because I can assure you, after decades of attending these things, I've yet to be in a room where that has occurred.
And we sort of cut short even the length of the applause there. It just went on and on. But remind us what it's hard to understand what he was saying scientifically, but tell us what the finding was.
So the finding was for a new treatment of pancreatic cancer called daraxonrasib, complicated term. It is a drug that tries to target a genetic signal that is very commonly found in pancreatic cancers. And what it did is that the drug that was administered in 500 patients with metastatic, very serious spreading pancreatic cancer, it doubled the survival to 13 months, as opposed to the traditional survival, which is roughly 6 months.
Twice as long.
Twice as long. And think about that is incredible. The side effects seem to be tolerable. Quality of life seemed pretty good for those patients. And the only big side effect is that you get this very kind of suntan look. If Ben Sass, former president of University of Florida senator, he's on it. And if you noticed, if you've ever seen interviews with him recently, he has that skin that looks very like suntan.
He's almost like bleeding from his face in some of those interviews.
That is the side effect that people
so serious.
See with that. You have to kind of watch it. But for the most part, though, the news was good. People reported good quality of life while on this drug, and it increased survival. And for a condition that is so difficult to treat, that is huge news of applause for that. He deserved it for presenting that. I always get emotional look at it, because it's like, That just doesn't happen.
Yeah, he seemed emotionally impacted himself to that reaction. And so this was a stage 3 or a phase 3, I guess, clinical trial.
Right.
What does that mean? Is it getting close to something that would be widely available?
So phase 3 is is the final phase before it goes up for FDA approval. What they did do, because it's so dramatic a response, is they increased compassionate access, if you will, so that people can get it through clinical trials, if you will, but extensions of it all over the country. The FDA has responded in a very positive way. It has not been approved yet, but it is likely to get approved. It is made, I believe, by Revolution Pharma. It's a new pharma company, and they are desperately trying to get that to market as soon as they can.
Well, it's a good reminder, since yesterday we were talking about big cutbacks in medical research. And in fact, the Trump administration, shortly after we did that story, announcing a whole bunch of new rules on funding, federal funding of any kind, including for medical research, that could limit things, areas of research, whether it's for DEI reasons or any number of things. So perhaps a good reminder of just the value of some of this research, how life-changing it can be.
This one is, I will say, it appears to be a game changer. And I just, for those who are out there listening, this is something to kind of, if you find yourself at that, it's a reason to look up to see how you can get access to that drug.
Well, I love talking to you about some good news too. Dr. Joe Sirven, he is a Mayo Clinic neurologist. He's host of WJCT's program, What's Health Got to Do with It, which airs Saturdays at 4. Also airing all over the country now as it's kind of increasing its footprint. So congrats on that. And thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure, Ann.
All right. We'll be back in just a minute. We're going to meet the creative minds behind the Duval Comic and Zine Fest. Welcome back. A celebration of experimental publishing returns this year in the CoRK Arts District in Riverside. Here to tell us about the 5th annual Comic and Zine Fest, we are joined by a couple of zinesters. Kiana Blaylock, she is a poet, teacher, and independent journalist. Kiana, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we are also joined by Tony Iupi. He's an art educator, cartoonist, and storyteller. Tony, welcome back.
Hi.
Hi. So let's start with why we created, we being you, created this annual celebration. What is what's the need to sort of take time out and look at zines and evaluate or appreciate them?
Yeah, so DCAS has been going on for 5 years, and the whole impetus of it was to celebrate self-publishing and to also celebrate self-expression through words and pictures.
Yeah. And this is a art form, Kiana, that goes way back. Some attribute it to even the Harlem Renaissance in the 20s, you know, when there was this need for this independent publishing arm, but it got kind of a boost from sci-fi fans in the 30s. Mm-hmm. And then I think of the era that I grew up in, where zines were very much about indie music and punk rock as a resource for people who are trying to connect to bands or learn about other bands. But it has changed even since then and gone through several other iterations to the present day.
Yeah, I really like to look back at the Harlem Renaissance, because I think that's part of the history that a lot of people don't think about, with like the Little magazine with like Zero No Hurston and Langston Hughes. And I think when people think of zines, they just think of like weird kids doing weird things, but like these literary giants that we look up to also saw a need for self-publishing in a time where they probably weren't getting the money or the resources. Yeah. And then you go into like the punk era, with people just sharing things they like about the punk scene and different bands and different musicians. And I think kind of like what Tony was saying, how there's a need for self-expression. even though things have changed, that has always stayed the same. Like
Yeah.
people seeing that need and
Yeah.
having that desire.
Yeah, that ability to connect through that art form or that publishing form to bond over things that are a shared interest, all pre-internet and really
Yes.
sort of necessary then. But it does seem that it's still a tool to build community. Can you talk a little bit about that and sort of how this annual festival
Yeah.
feeds into that?
Yeah, so part of the things with DCAS and other zine fests around is the community building. It sets itself apart from a typical comic book convention. So with zines, we actually brought zines because part of zine culture is to share things,
Mhm.
and so sharing, bartering, sharing ideas, even like sharing process. So at DCAS, we'll have zine making stations. We'll have the risograph machine. It's kind of like Xerox meets screen printing, and so people will be doing on-site like zine making and poster making that day. We will have a share zine table where people bring and swap. It's called a zine swap. So those are some of the things that you'll see at DCAS that help build community.
A lot of really hands-on stuff, button making as well. And
Yes.
you talked
Mhm.
about the Riso machine. What is it aesthetically, do you think, that sets aside a zine from a different kind of publication, whether it's a comic or just a small scale magazine?
I think magazines are a little bit more polished, and that's not to say that zines can't be, but I think there is something about how you can tell like a person made it and put their time into it, and even put like their own flourishes onto it that you just can't always get from printing out pieces of paper.
Yeah.
Some people may draw like color with like color pencils on their zines. I think that aspect of the, not to say that it's bad to be polished, but there is something that is uniquely different from something that I may make or Tony may make from like Vogue. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like you can see the difference.
Yeah. And there is a little bit of a element that does make it look more individual, more specific to the artist. And I feel like a lot of artists right now, whether they're into comics or
Mhm.
even into visual art, are a lot more likely these days to create a zine. They
Yes.
might be somebody that is just straight up regular writer, right? But
Mhm.
or a songwriter or somebody, but they lean into this different kind of art form as a way to spread their
Yes.
identity and to share a little bit more
Yeah.
about their story.
And so I make zines and comics, and sometimes people will ask me, well, what's the difference between a comic and a zine? And so I usually say a comic can be a zine, but not all zines are comics.
Exactly.
And so when people are, so I go to comic conventions a lot. I've been tabling more, and folks will workshop or have a mini comic as a proof of concept for something bigger that they want to push or promote.
Uh,
And so that is one of the ways that you can do that. Other words for zines that people might not think of are like poetry chapbooks.
Mhm.
So at the Jacksonville Public Library, that collection, they have a zine collection. It's the largest in the Southeast, and it has some of the earliest Boing Boing zines, magazines. They were zines before it was a website. So, and they've been around forever.
Yeah, and it can be small scale. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
a couple of kids in my high school who published the first zine that I'd ever seen,
Yeah.
and it was very comic heavy, but it was
Mhm.
also a lot about what was happening in the
Yeah.
school. And
It's zines and comics and zines and music just tie in together. Like that was my first experience with zines, was going to the Milk Bar in the 90s
yeah.
and someone handing me something, and it turned me on.
So this has been an event. It has been partnered in previous years with the library, which obviously there's a lot of cross connection with their huge zine collection. But this is at CoRK Arts District, and that has its own vibe and own artistic identity. So I'm interested in how this fits there, why you wanted to be there, how it might be different because it's there.
Do you want to share?
I just think it's a more of like a community centered space. Like we were talking before this and how there are artists and they have their studios there and they're open to making zines. And I think it's just a really cool place to have like a cross connection between artistry where people, like you were saying, who may have not even known what zines are now open to having that as a way to like push their self-expression, push their, what they want to do in life, their artistry, all those things. I think it's just a cool place where those worlds can like finally meet for real in Jacksonville.
It's like it's gonna be like incubator on incubator, like that creative, getting those creative juices flowing. So some of the artists will have their studios open. Sorry, and some of those artists, like I've had conversations, and they're like, "Well, I do poetry. Like, how can you help me figure this out?" Or I want to do like an art book, but I don't know how. Like, so that's going to be a great connecting point for folks.
Yeah.
So like artists, like fine artists seeing zine makers and people who might make what sometimes people would call ephemera art, those folks being in the same spaces because those things feed off of each other. And it's just another way of generating ideas, putting yourself out there, trying new things, figuring out what kinds of things you like to make.
It does seem too that there's still room for expansion. You think about people who blog or whatever, that can be a different outlet, can reach a totally different audience in some ways than, a computer
Yes.
frame. So this has grown a lot over the last few years. What are you expecting in terms of turnout, and who all do you think is ultimately your audience? I mean, as you sit here today, who do you think would enjoy this, get something out of it, if they're maybe not already deeply into the zine world?
The first thing I thought of, were students, especially. It's the summertime. You're looking for things to do, and I think the summer is the best time for you to just sit down and figure out any creative outlets you may want to do. I'm speaking as a teacher who always is telling their kids to read and do things. So I do have a little bit of bias there, but I think students for sure. And just anyone who is just looking for a creative outlet. I think the summertime, a lot of the times we get like this like refresh of like, what do I want to do? Who do I want to be?
Yep.
And all those things. So I think this is perfect for anyone who is looking to try something different.
Yeah.
I think it's also for people who are tired of digital media and streaming.
Yes.
I think it's really something for people who are interested in physical media and wanting to connect with artists face to face.
Yeah. It's also a cool opportunity. The studios are not always open to the public at CoRK
Correct.
Arts. And so being able to see some of the interior there is also a very inspirational space and a cool opportunity to meet some of them.
And the River City Reader book mobile thing will be there with Mayor Deegan and the library, and then we'll have like some food vendors and some other vendors will be there as well. So we're also partnering with Saloon Coffee, and we're partnering with Bold City Brewery, and so there's going to be a Duval deal. So like
Nice.
there'll be food, the people will be open, like walking around CoRK, and it's just going to be a great experience.
All right. Well, it's the 5th annual Duval Comic Zine Fest, also known as DCAZ. It's Saturday, June 8th. It runs from 11 to 5 at the CoRK Arts District on Roselle Street. It is free and open to the public. Kiana Blaylock, Tony Ayupi, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Up next, an upcoming musical review explores the genius of the famously difficult composer, Stephen Sondheim.
Congaree & Pen, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpen.com. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Even when we drive defensively, accidents can still happen. Do you know what to do next? There's more to it than you might think.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
WJCT Public Media and the Florida Theater invites you to an unforgettable night of live music with Sean Mullins and special guest Kat Ridgway at the WJCT Soundstage, Thursday, June 4th, 7:30 p.m. Grammy-nominated Sean Mullins has built a career spanning Americana, folk, and rock. Experience an intimate performance from one of music's most distinctive storytellers. Tickets and information at thefloridatheater.com.
You're a great leader. I say it to everybody. You're a great leader. Sometimes people don't like me saying it, but I say it anyway because it's true. I only say the truth.
That's President Trump lavishing praise on China's Xi Jinping after their recent summit. President Xi, however, made it clear he thinks the U.S. may be fading. We'll talk about the view of the summit from China. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
Hundreds of thousands of federal workers have left the government since President Trump took office. Now the administration wants those left to sign NDAs. Critics say it could silence the very people who can speak up about government misconduct. What could it mean for the federal government and the rest of us? If you're a federal worker, past or present, join us next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. The legendary lyricist and composer Stephen Sondheim died 5 years ago and in his 90s, but still remains freshly fascinating for generations of fans. Here to tell us about a local production of the musical review Sondheim on Sondheim, we are joined by its director, Curtis Williams. Curtis, good morning.
Good morning.
We're also joined by two performers in the show, Josh Waller. Josh, welcome.
Hi.
And Leanna Gullo. Leanne, thanks for being here. How are you?
I'm well, thanks.
Good. So talk, if you will, Curtis, about the conceit of this show. This is something that actually came out 10 years before Stephen Sondheim's death, but it sort of marries his songbook with an interview done with him.
Yes, they basically just asked him all the questions that everyone would want to know from the man himself. And so you get to see Stephen tell you exactly what he was thinking when he wrote a song. You get to hear songs where he goes, yeah, that song really sucked. And so I rewrote it and it became the song that you know today, but this was version A.
Yeah. And his footprint is just all over Broadway. I mean, he's the composer and lyricist behind Gypsy, West Side Story, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Sweeney Todd, Sunday in the Park with George, like so many. And so he is, almost everybody has been in Sondheim show if they've been in musical theater, right? But you've been in many of them. So tell us, Josh, about from the very first production you were in throughout your whole performing career.
Oh gosh, yeah. I say that I'm a spoiled brat. I feel so lucky. My very first musical ever in high school was West Side Story, and Stephen Sondheim wrote the lyrics for that.
And you were the lead.
I was, yeah, my very first show. That's kind of a daunting task, but it was fun.
Brat.
Yeah, I am. I readily admit it.
Yeah.
But I've done A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum twice. I've done Sweeney Todd, Merrily We Roll Along, Company, Assassins. I was even in a production of Into the Woods that was tried to happen twice and got canceled twice due to COVID. So I should have done that one as well. But
yeah. What do you like about him? What is it like performing his work?
Oh, it's like nothing else. He's so complicated and interesting. And what I say is, it's the hardest music to learn. I'm a musician. I read music, and it's still very difficult.
Why?
I don't know why. That's his style. Lots of internal rhyming. He's never makes it easy for you, so you will sing similar passages in one song, but it's always a little bit different. But when you are successful at it, it's satisfying like nothing else.
Leanne, this is a performance that you're doing. It's not your first show at Theater Jax by a long shot, but tell us about staging something in that theater. What is unique about it, kind of how the community responds, because it is a real institution.
I believe that Theater Jacksonville is the best stage to perform on in the city. There's really nothing like it. The way that the acoustics work on that stage just make your voice soar. And the the way that the audience is able to take all of that in, just the acoustics and how you're able to sing on that stage, it's just such a special experience. So anytime there's a Theater Jack show come up, I always try to throw my hat in the ring.
And usually we'll say like, oh, you're playing this character. It's not really like that in the Sondheim on Sondheim. You're sort of playing yourself, right?
Yes, we're all characters within these songs, but because they're all out of context and sewn together through this. The cast has kind of dubbed it a review-mentary. It's a musical review, but also a documentary a little bit. So we're doing these songs out of context, but there are character moments within all of these songs. But essentially, we are playing ourselves.
Yeah, Curtis. It seems like, as you say, he's talking and setting up some of the songs in the performance. But it does seem like maybe some of them are tracking his biography a little bit, and that the songs then are designed to kind of reflect his evolution as an artist or a human being.
Yes, definitely. And he actually sort of addresses this within the show where he talks about people, asking, oh, is your music all autobiographical? And, he has his own response to it, but directing the show, I think two things can be true at once. I think as an artist, you can have your own reasons as to why you created art, but an outsider can look at it and say, oh, no, it was because that was happening in your life. It's because that's the way you grew up. And so as an audience member, you're able to see both sides of it in a way that you wouldn't be able to see it if Stephen Sondheim was not telling you about how he grew up, about his childhood with the Hammersteins, about all of these trials and tribulations he went through in his life. And then you hear what came out of that. And it's like, of course, this was influenced by your life.
Well, I know that it is a lot to put together, a lot of elements, a lot of moving parts, but obviously so much great music. Curtis Williams, Josh Waller, Leanne Gullo, thank you so much for being here. Break a leg.
Thank you so much.
I should say that the performance is running. I should say when it's running, and it's tell me the dates.
We open on Friday.
Okay.
Through the 21st.
Friday, and then it runs, so it's from the 5th to the 21st. All right, at Theater Jacksonville. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for joining us. Please join us tomorrow when we talk about Stanton High, a school that's been destroyed, rebuilt, moved, and had its name changed 4 times, but remains a big part of our local history. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. AARP Florida. Voting has long been part of civic life for many Floridians 50+. AARP Florida has trusted, nonpartisan information citizens need to make their voice heard. Details are at aarp.org/FLVotes.
This is WJCT News